Hey everyone, my name is Catalyst. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are doing well. Today, we will be updating our specialist power rankings for Battlefield 2042. The last time that we updated these power rankings was at the very beginning of Season 5, all the way back in June. And Season 6, which launched last week, actually brought around quite a few significant balancing changes to these specialists that have shaken up the hierarchy in terms of how these specialists stand up to one another. If you've watched one of these videos before, you'll know that I normally start from scratch and place every specialist in their respective tiers and talk a little bit about why I think they deserve to be in that tier. But with 14 different specialists in the game, even when allocating 2 minutes per specialist, and that's on the conservative side, it does end up being a pretty lengthy video, around a half an hour. So, as you can probably see by now, we'll be doing things a little bit differently today. Instead, we'll be picking up right where we left off with the last list. I even have the exact same tier list loaded up on the PC right now, and instead of talking about every single specialist, we'll only be going through and discussing the specialists that saw significant changes and will be moving in the tier list today. It'll be better for me so I don't have to talk in circles about specialists that haven't really changed much, and better for you so you can get back out on the battlefield faster. So if you enjoy the video, make sure you drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel. We just passed 19,000 subscribers, trying to get to 20,000. That would be a huge milestone for the channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you enjoy the content, you know what to do. So frankly, I'm gonna start this off with the specialist that you're all probably here to see where he ranks now. I'm just gonna rip it off like a band-aid and not deprive you of it for longer than need be. And that person, that specialist, is Rao. Now Rao was formerly in the Stop Nerfing Me tier, which has seen a bit of a renaming along with Sundance. Dice, what are we doing here? What is the end goal here? This has just entirely flipped the concept of balance between infantry and vehicles on its head completely, with one update. Rao has always been the quintessential example in this game as to how delicate the specialist balancing can be, and, at least in my opinion, as to why specialists are not good for Battlefield, because you take a specialist like Rao that can serve such a very strong purpose on the battlefield, and if you make him too strong, it makes things horrible for a very large component of the game. But if you make him underpowered, what's the point of using Rao, right? So he's always like sat on this fence and has always face planted on one side or the other, and as of right now, he is once again face planted on the completely absurdly overpowered what the fuck are we doing here side of the fence. Like now I'm expecting Rao next update to be able to shoot like laser beams out of his eyes or something, or whenever he looks in a general vehicle direction, it just spontaneously combusts like the Death Star in Star Wars. Just to run through things that are now a part of Rao's kit, and it just feels like DICE, for whatever reason, decide, we don't really know what we want to do with Rao here, so let's just throw everything into his kit at once and see how he does. So Rao can now hack vehicles and paint them for self-flame through walls, terrain, and buildings. 2, he can now disrupt vehicle players' vision by completing the hack. Obviously, it has that scramble, which isn't exactly it's nothing more than a visual effect, but it's definitely distracting. 3, it now disables parts of the vehicle, not just one, all of them, and essentially forces the vehicle player to use its repair. And obviously, Rao's hack works on a cooldown, so he can just repeatedly disable these vehicles as much as he wants without much of a counter. And 4, there is also the infantry component to Rao's kit. When he hacks an infantry player, every opposing player within a 10-meter radius of the player that Rao hacks is now revealed on the minimap. And and I'm almost forgetting his passive ability, which allows Rao to spot players that shoot him. Like, are we just checking off a bunch of things on a list here that we can add to Rao's kit? This is absurdly strong. I don't expect him to remain this strong, but as of right now, he is arguably the most broken specialist in the entire game. Like, it's one thing to have a bunch of Liz missiles flying at you at all times, but it's another thing to have a character just have a free damage on you as an ability on cooldown every 10 to 15 seconds, and you have to use your repair pretty much every single time a Rao player hacks you, and that just frees you up to being harassed by Liz missiles and SPH launchers and the M5 recoilless launcher and all these other anti-tank gadgets. Rao is just absurdly strong right now. He's S tier. They need to figure out a way to bring him down into the mid tiers here, because this is just a very, very bad swing of things in terms of the balance of infantry and vehicle gameplay. So now that that rant now that that rant is, out of the equation and done with, now to discuss the engineer balancing kind of conundrum that DICE have made with the Season 6 updates. So, if you were unaware, engineer changes were a big talking point for this update of Battlefield 2042, and the changes to both Crawford and Boris were some very highly talked about changes. Crawford got a new passive, which essentially gave him extra RPG and M5 recoilless explosive ammunition, so rocket ammunition, and Boris got a buff to his sentry turret, a 25% fire rate increase when you're in the vicinity of the turret, and I believe they also increased the area that you need to stand in order to achieve that 25% fire rate buff. So, engineers have seen some love in this update, or at least that's what they would want you to believe. Truthfully, only one specialist in the engineer class has received love in this update, and that is Crawford. And it's hard to talk about Crawford without also talking about Boris as well. So I'm going to try and do my best to differentiate. Talking specifically about Crawford, have these changes to his kit made him a stronger engineer? Yes. Have they made him stronger than Liz? No. I think that in terms of the hierarchy of the engineer class, even though there's a lot of players that are probably going to be pretty happy with the buffs given to Crawford, I think explosive and rocket ammo was something that was very highly requested in terms of how players preferred that DICE buffed engineer specialist. So there's probably a large amount of players that are going to be happy with this. Crawford is still not going to be better than Liz because of the versatility that having a TV-guided missile on cooldown provides for you with Liz. So Liz is always going to be the top specialist in the engineer class unless something drastic happens. I don't think Crawford's primary ability with his Vulcan minigun is good enough in order for him to be considered higher. It's kind of just there. I think most people are going to be picking Crawford for his extra explosive ammo, and while that's good for Crawford, that is really horrible for Boris, which is the other side of the equation here. And I've said this before, if the goal of this change was to overall increase the amount of players playing the engineer class and making the engineer class more viable, they have only done half the job here. So Crawford aside, the other part of the equation is Boris, who Boris, as you have already recognized, is still in his lower tier, the worst specialist in the game. He's still in the I'm really, really dog shit tier, and honestly, with the changes to Crawford, elevating Crawford so much, he could probably honestly be beneath his own Boris tier here. The 25% fire rate buff for the turret would be fine if Boris also got Crawford's passive ability, but he doesn't. And so essentially what has happened here is DICE have buffed Boris's turret for no reason, because I don't imagine that many players are going to be choosing to play Boris when they could be playing Crawford and getting the additional explosive ammo. In my opinion, I think one is vastly superior to the other. I don't imagine that Boris is going to see a higher pick rate, and I think he's just as bad, if not worse, because of the power creep that is now given to Crawford. So honestly, they need to give Boris something other than his turret. DICE keeps trying to make the turret work, even though it has not been a very strong ability since they nerfed it, rightfully so, into the ground in like Season 1 or Season 2. So they need to give Boris something. They either need to give him Crawford's old repair boost passive to give Boris a little bit something else to work with. Otherwise, this is how things stand in the engineer class. Liz, then Crawford, then Boris. So now this has opened up a spot in the situationally good and mostly bad tier, and Dozer is going to fit right in there. Now, technically speaking, Dozer has not moved. He was in this tier in the last video, but I have renamed this tier a little bit to better describe how I feel about it, and it went from the not good tier to the situationally good, mostly bad tier. Dozer actually got quite a few nerfs this update. Essentially, they took his movement buffs that he got at the beginning of Season 5 and cut those buffs in half. So, you know, his rotational speed while carrying the shield got nerfed. His turn speed got nerfed. His movement speed got nerfed. Dozer has gotten worse with this update, but he's not quite in Boris tier, and obviously this tier right here is kind of a meme in a way. So I mean, theoretically, if you wanted to do this, you could. Honestly, I think this probably works a little bit better. I mean, the color is a little bit off, but this probably more accurately describes how I feel. Dozer is just, I don't want to say just as bad as he used to be, but he definitely got nerfed. Dozer players are definitely punching air a little bit right now. They got so far, but in the end, it didn't really matter because DICE said, hey, we're launching a close quarters map and we can't have Dozers dominating everything. So definitely in the new map Redacted, Dozer is a popular pick. He's very effective, but in the grand scheme of things, and I know it's hard to think about because a lot of people are only playing the new map right now, Dozer got worse. Dozer definitely moving back down a tier. Feels right, even though it sucks for Dozer players considering that he just got a buff like 2 or 3 months ago. So now we move on to Paik. Now, Paik was in the only use on a rainy day tier in the last video, and she's going to be moving all the way up to the good but not elite tier. I think Paik got sneakily probably the best buff in this entire update, and I don't mean in terms of like how strongly she got buffed. I mean in terms of just like the overall balance of the game. This buff was perfect for Paik. I think what really was holding Paik back was how shitty her EMG scanner had become. It became very difficult to read the information that the scanner was giving you and interpret, you know, where players were, how fast they were coming at you, and essentially using her ability at times in the past by itself without the use of like a tugs device or like a sensor grenade. Using the ability by itself sometimes felt really, really bad and unrewarding, especially considering how long the cooldown is. I'm pretty sure that this is the longest cooldown in the game, with the exception to like maybe Crawford's turret. I think that Paik's EMG scanner had the longest cooldown of any primary specialist ability in the entire game, so at times it really, really felt bad to use her ability and have it be so bad and then have to wait for it on cooldown for 45 seconds or 50 seconds. So I think with the way that they increased the visibility of the outlines, I think is really good for her. It's definitely easier to identify people. It doesn't highlight them for an eternity like it did before she got nerfed. So it's definitely found a nice middle ground between her overpowered state as it was right before or around Season 2 and where she was before, which was honestly not so great. So that, in addition to the new kind of UI change that DICE made in this update, where there's now like a scanning like yellow rectangle that is on your screen when you spot somebody, so that also gives you enhanced target identification, and that works really well with her passive, in which when you do damage to other players, it spots them on the map for your teammates. So I think Paik has really found a nice niche in the meta. I don't think she's elite, obviously, because as we already talked about, Rao basically has her ability for free now. I don't know whether or not that will change, but I think Paik has found a nice, good niche in the specialist hierarchy here with her update. And last but not least, in terms of major changes, Zain has gone from the good but not elite tier to the mid as fuck tier. And I think a lot of people may disagree with this. They may find this a little bit shocking, but I think that the changes to Zain and just in general, the explosive spam nerf to the game has hurt Zain more than people would realize. Look, the passive is still going to be really, really strong. It's one of the best passive abilities in the game, if not the best passive ability in the game. But the nerfs to his air burst and to explosives and the nerf to the underbarrel attachments, it's all hurt Zain. And now that the air burst only has 1 magazine with 5 rounds per mag instead of 2 magazines with 6 rounds per mag, it just completely reduces the amount of spam that you are able to put out with Zain, and it makes it that much more difficult in order to work around the passive. And honestly, reducing the amount of ammunition in the airburst from 6 to 5 has much more of an effect than you would think it would. Losing that extra shot means that you are not finishing off groups of people as efficiently as before, because sometimes, you know, you'd be firing the airburst and you weren't quite dialed in, then maybe around the second or third shot you'd get a hit marker, and now because you don't have that extra round, you're not able to finish people off with the airburst, and then you go back on cooldown. You know, that's why he's moving down a tier here to the mid as fuck tier, because again, now it really revolves around playing around his passive without all the benefits of working with an SPH launcher, which got nerfed, an underbarrel grenade launcher, which got nerfed, frag grenades, which got nerfed, C5, which got nerfed. You kind of get my point. Zain is still a good specialist. I think a lot of people are still going to find very effective ways to use him, but he's definitely not among the upper echelon of specialists here anymore. There's definitely some more specialists that I think I would play over Zain in the current hierarchy of the game. Hey everybody, Catalyst in post-editing, realizing that I did not talk about Mackay at all during this recording. Now, Mackay got a pair of changes to his grapple hook, both to the speed in which he travels on the hook, and also the range in which his hook is usable. And a lot of people were wondering whether or not those changes moved him in or out of S tier. And the short answer is that he is now moving down a little bit towards the bottom of the S tier. I think that Blasco and Falk are both better specialists than he is, but I don't think he will ever completely move out of the S tier until DICE changes his passive ability, which of course is the enhanced strafe speed, movement speed that you get on zip lines and ladders and things like that. I don't think that Mackay is ever going to fall out of S tier unless they make changes to that. Mackay's grapple hook changes are noticeable, but they definitely don't hinder his impactfulness on the battlefield, so that's why he is remaining in the S tier, for those wondering why I didn't talk about him in this recording. But other than that, I don't think there's any other specialists that really had any changes that are worth talking about. I think Irish got a little bit stronger with the explosive nerf. I think Casper did get a little bit of a cooldown nerf to his recon drone. That's neither here nor there. And Angel, just even with the addition of ammo pouches and med pouches, just consistently remains to be the forgotten specialist of this game, in my opinion, just because of how insignificant ammo is. But that is the updated specialist power rankings for Season 6. Let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know if I got it right. Let me know if I got it wrong. How do you rank these specialists? If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you drop a like on it and subscribe for more content. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Catalyst, and I will see you all another time. Well, that would be the entire team.